Hello and welcome to 7/8. We're going to review the questions at the end of chapter 21. Questions 10, 11, 12, 14, and 15. They're on pages 629 and 630. Sorry for the weird camera angle. As you know, I'm recording these with my iPhone now and then uploading them to YouTube. So there's where there's a will, there's a way, right? If at first you don't succeed, try and try again. Let's get started with 10A. What three goals did Enlightenment thinkers believe the use of reason could achieve? Knowledge, freedom, and happiness. Don't forget that you're in charge of this episode. You have the power to pause me or rewind me, whichever way. I'm going to go this way. Rewind me if you need to. 10B. How was the influence of Greek and Roman ideas similar to the influence of the scientific revolution on the Enlightenment? Well, both included the idea that natural law governed how the world operates. Pretty simple. Both included the idea that natural law governed how the world operated. 10C asks, is censorship ever acceptable? And we can talk about that in class. Is censorship ever acceptable? 11A, who were two important leaders in the American colonies? So they're referring here to the individuals that they mention in the book by name, Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. Of course, there are many important leaders in the American colonies, but in this case, Franklin, who was a prolific author and a very outspoken guy, and also just downright pretty darn smart. And of course, Thomas Jefferson, also equally prolific, engaged in a lot of things, specifically writing ideas of how government should work to avoid tyranny and afford freedom to citizens. Two brilliant guys. Glad we had them on our team. 11B, what ideas did Locke and Rousseau share? How do these ideas differ from most monarchs, most kings and queens? How do they feel? So both Voltaire and both Rousseau and Locke believed that the government's job, the duty of the government, is to serve the people and to protect their rights. Whereas most kings and queens believe that they have divine right to govern, that they've been granted power by some greater being, some greater entity, be it God, to govern, right? 12A, we're going to skip 12C. It says, do you think things would have happened the same or differently in colonies if colonial leaders had not been familiar with Enlightenment ideas? That's one we can share in class. So how did Enlightenment ideas influence colonial leaders and ultimately revolution? It's a really good question. 12A, what event started the French Revolution? Bastille, the storming of the Bastille, right? It's celebrated every July in France, Bastille Day. And as the story goes, when they actually got into the Bastille, there weren't that many prisoners in there. I've heard the number 7. There were 7 prisoners, but they did have an arsenal there in the Bastille, so they took weapons. So it wasn't entirely about setting prisoners free. They did set some prisoners free, but 7, I think, is the correct number. You could ask some French historian, Madame Noble, possibly may be able to enlighten you on the number, but I'm pretty sure it was less than 10, but they did get some weapons. So 12B, what basic ideas are found in both the English Bill of Rights and the Magna Carta? Magna Carta limits power, right? English Bill of Rights limits power by designated certain rights to people that cannot be taken from them without some sort of due process, some sort of law, some sort of process of the law, some sort of day in court, so to speak, in front of a jury of your peers, that kind of stuff. But the Magna Carta, we talked about the Magna Carta limiting power early on, right? And then, of course, the English Bill of Rights is just an outward recognition that citizens have rights, right? And so that's in 1789, I think, is the English Bill of Rights. No, 1689. To look that one up. 12C, the way people interpret the Constitution has changed over the years. What do you think is a reason for this change? That is a fantastic question, and we should definitely talk about that in class. But the Constitution was written to be a living document, to be flexible, to be able to accommodate changes. The people who wrote the Constitution knew that things would change, and they wanted the document to be able to change. So they allowed for an amendment process, so to amend or change the document as it goes. It's difficult to change the Constitution, and that's by design. Right? It's supposed to be difficult because we want any changes to be well thought out. We don't want frivolous changes. What was the word we used to use? I can't remember. We used to use a funny word. I'll think of it in a minute. 14, how did the English Bill of Rights and the Declaration of the Rights of Man and the Citizen change the power of the monarchs? Well, of course, they reduced the power of those monarchs and instead shift power. They reduce the power and then shift that power over to Parliament and the French people. Right? So basically, they're taking power from the monarchs and giving it to the people. So remember, power is a lot like mass. It's neither created nor destroyed. It's just moved around. So in this case, it moves from the monarchs to the people, whether that be the people themselves or in the form of a representative government like the Parliament. 15, how would daily life have changed for a peasant after the French Revolution? Well, their tax burden would be lifted. They wouldn't owe as much money in taxes, which would give them a little bit of freedom, so their quality of life would have definitely improved. And they were also able to engage as citizens in their government, to practice civics. So that would have been neat. I still can't think of that word that describes frivolous, tiny changes. Willy-nilly. Willy-nilly. So yeah, not that the founding fathers would have used the words willy-nilly, but that's to discourage frivolous or changes and just making willy-nilly decisions. Sorry, that's terrible. All right, so this is 7 minutes. I'm going to stop talking now. If you have any questions, I hope you've written them down or jotted them down or typed them into your documents so you can ask them in class. And looking forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.